The will reading and the betrayal. The perfect life that wasn't. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown Seattle office, each drop a tiny explosion against the glass. I stood there, coffee growing cold in my hand, staring out at the gray city below. My name is Marcus Blackwood, and until 3 days ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was 35 years old, a successful architect with my own firm, happily married for 10 years to the woman I believed was my soulmate. I had built a life brick by brick, project by project, always playing by the rules, always doing the right thing. But standing there that Tuesday morning, watching the rain wash the streets clean while my world crumbled, I realized how blind I had been, how stupidly, completely blind. My phone buzzed for the 14th time that hour. Victoria again. My wife. The woman who had stood beside me through struggling years when we ate ramen noodles for dinner and dreamed of better days. The woman who had kissed me goodbye that very morning with a smile that now felt like a knife blade hidden in silk. I didn't answer. Instead, I replayed the last 72 hours in my mind, trying to find the exact moment when everything had changed. When the mask had finally slipped. The grandmother who saw everything. It had started on Saturday morning with a phone call that shattered the quiet of our expensive queen and home. My grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood, had passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 89. She had been the matriarch of our family, a sharp-minded woman who had built a real estate empire from nothing after my grandfather died young. She had raised my father alone, sent him to the best schools, and when he died in a car accident when I was 12, she had done the same for me. Eleanor had been tough as nails and twice as sharp. She never missed a detail, never forgot a conversation, and never, ever trusted easily. Growing up, I thought she was too hard on people, too suspicious. She had never warmed to Victoria, not even after 10 years of marriage. At family dinners, Eleanor would watch my wife with those pale blue eyes that missed nothing, asking questions that felt like tests Victoria never quite passed. That girl loves what you can give her, not who you are, Eleanor had told me once. 5 years into my marriage, I had been angry, defensive. I told her she was wrong, that she didn't understand modern relationships. Eleanor had simply nodded, sipped her tea, and said, "Time will tell, Marcus. Time always tells the truth." I should have listened. The will that changed everything. The funeral was on Monday, a gray affair that matched Seattle's perpetual gloom. Victoria had been perfect that day, the supportive wife in her black dress, dabbing at her eyes at appropriate moments, holding my hand during the service. I had been grateful for her presence, leaning on her as we buried the woman who had shaped my entire life. After the service, the family gathered at Eleanor's estate lawyer's office for the reading of the will. It was a formal room with dark wood paneling and leather chairs that smelled of old money and older secrets. Victoria sat beside me, her hand in mine, as Jonathan Pierce, Eleanor's lawyer for 40 years, opened the thick envelope that contained my grandmother's final wishes. The will was straightforward for most of the family. Cousins received generous gifts. Charities received substantial donations. The family home in the San Juan Islands would be maintained as a retreat for future generations. And then Jonathan came to the part about me. "To my grandson, Marcus James Blackwood," he read, his voice steady and professional. "I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including all properties, investments, and liquid assets, currently valued at approximately $15 million. The room went silent. $15 million. I felt Victoria's hand tighten on mine, her breath catching. I was stunned. I knew Eleanor was wealthy, but this was beyond anything I had imagined. The lawyer continued, explaining the details of various properties, stock portfolios, and trust funds, but I barely heard him. My mind was spinning. Victoria leaned close, whispering in my ear, "Oh my God, Marcus, 15 million. Her voice was breathy, excited. Something in her tone made me uncomfortable, but I pushed the feeling away. This was my wife. We had built our life together. Of course she would be excited for us. But then I noticed something. As Jonathan continued reading, detailing the conditions and structures of the inheritance, Victoria's attention never wavered. She wasn't looking at me with sympathy for my loss or comfort for my grief. She was staring at the lawyer, her eyes bright and sharp, calculating. She was doing math in her head, I realized, already spending money we hadn't even received yet. The mask begins to slip. The change in Victoria started immediately. That very evening, as we drove home from the lawyer's office, she was on her phone, scrolling through real estate websites, showing me mansions in Medina and waterfront estates on Mercer Island. "We could finally upgrade," she said, her voice animated in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Get out of Queen and get something really spectacular. With 15 million, Marcus, we could live like we've always deserved to." Always deserved? We lived in a beautiful home that I had personally designed. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, paid for with my work. When had it stopped being enough? "Victoria," I said carefully, keeping my eyes on the road. "My grandmother just died. Can we talk about this later?" She fell silent, but I could feel her irritation radiating off her like heat. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom without a word. I sat in my study, surrounded by the architectural drawings and models that represented years of my work, and felt a coldness creeping into my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I went downstairs for water and noticed the glow of Victoria's phone under the bedroom door. She was still awake, scrolling through something. I almost went in, almost asked if she was okay, but something stopped me. Some instinct I didn't even know I had. The discovery. The next morning, Victoria was different. Cold. Distant. She barely spoke to me over breakfast, just scrolled through her phone with a small smile playing at her lips. When I asked if something was wrong, she said, "Nothing, Marcus. Everything's actually perfect." The way she said it made my skin crawl. I went to work, but I couldn't concentrate. My assistant, Jenny, asked if I was okay 3 times before lunch. I wasn't. Something fundamental had shifted in my world, and I didn't understand what or why. I left work early, telling Jenny I needed time to process my grandmother's death. It was true, but not the whole truth. I needed to go home. I needed to see Victoria, to talk to her, to understand why the woman I had loved for 10 years suddenly felt like a stranger. I pulled into our driveway at 3 p.m. Victoria's car was there. She wasn't supposed to be home. She worked as a marketing consultant and usually didn't return until 6. But there was her silver Mercedes, gleaming in the weak afternoon sun. I unlocked the front door quietly. The house was silent. No music, no television. Then I heard it. Victoria's laugh, light and carefree, coming from upstairs. She was on the phone, her voice carrying down the stairwell. I started up the stairs, planning to announce myself, when her words stopped me cold. I know, she was saying. "I can hardly believe it myself. 15 million, Derek. Can you imagine? The old bat finally did something useful and died. Derek, my business partner, my friend since college." Why was she talking to Derek about my grandmother's death? I stood frozen on the stairs as Victoria continued, her voice dropping to something intimate and conspiratorial. "No, he has no idea. Marcus is so trusting, so naive. He actually thinks I love him." She laughed again, a sound that cut through me like broken glass. The plan worked perfectly. We just had to wait for the old woman to die, and now we're set. The truth unveiled. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. My hand gripped the stair railing so hard my knuckles went white. "When?" Victoria was asking now. "How soon can we make it official? I want to file for divorce immediately, but Jonathan says I should wait a few months so it doesn't look suspicious. Apparently, there might be some clause about the inheritance. I need to check." A pause. "No, baby, don't worry. Washington is a community property state. I'm entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. That includes inheritances. By this time next year, we'll both be millionaires, and I'll finally be free of Marcus and his boring life." The words hit me like physical blows. Each one landed with precision, targeting everything I thought I knew about my life. My marriage, my friendship, my reality. I backed down the stairs silently, my heart thundering in my chest. I made it to the front door, slipped outside, got in my car. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove through the Seattle streets, rain starting again, the windshield wipers keeping a steady rhythm that matched the single thought pounding in my head. It was all a lie. All of it. The confrontation. I drove for 2 hours before I could think clearly. I ended up at Cary Park, staring out at the city skyline and the Space Needle piercing the gray sky. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Victoria, wondering where I was, her texts full of false concern. Marcus, are you okay? You left work early. I'm worried about you. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't heard her on the phone, I would have believed every word. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a call to Jonathan Pierce, Eleanor's lawyer. Despite it being after business hours, he answered immediately. Marcus, he said warmly, I was hoping you'd call. There are some additional details about your grandmother's we need to discuss. Can you come by the office tomorrow morning? Jonathan, I said, my voice rough. I need to ask you something. The inheritance. Is it protected from divorce? There was a long pause. Why do you ask? Just answer the question. Please. Another pause. Then Jonathan's voice came back. Quieter now, more careful. Your grandmother was very specific about the structure of the inheritance, Marcus. Very specific. Why don't you come in first thing tomorrow morning? Say 8 a.m. Before anyone else arrives. We need to talk. The return home. I finally went home at 8 p.m. Victoria was waiting in the living room, her face a perfect mask of wifely concern. If I hadn't known better, I would have rushed to her, apologized for worrying her, let her comfort me. Instead, I stood in the doorway and just looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had met in college, the woman I had fallen for, who had seemed so genuine, so real. How had I never seen it? Or had I seen it and chosen to ignore it? Had Eleanor been right all along? Marcus. Victoria stood, moving toward me. I was so worried. Where were you? Driving, I said flatly. Thinking. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Just a flicker, gone in an instant, replaced by concern again. Are you okay? She asked. I know losing Eleanor must be so hard. Eleanor. Not your grandmother. Not Grandma Eleanor, like she'd called her for years. Just Eleanor. The mask was slipping even now. I'm fine, Elide. Just tired. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. I need space. I saw the flash of irritation cross her face before she controlled it. Of course, she said sweetly. Whatever you need. I went upstairs, locked myself in the guest room, and sat on the bed in the darkness. My phone buzzed, a text from Derek. Hey man, haven't seen you at the office. You okay? Want to grab a drink? My business partner, my friend, the man who was sleeping with my wife, the man who was planning to help her take half of everything I had inherited. Rage bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce, but I forced it down. Rage wouldn't help me now. I needed to be smart, strategic. I needed to think like Eleanor had taught me. I texted back, thanks, maybe next week. Just need time with family stuff. Then I opened my phone's recording app, made sure it was working properly, and began to plan. If Victoria and Derek wanted to play games, I would play. But I would play to win. Tomorrow, I would meet with Jonathan and find out exactly what protections Eleanor had built into the inheritance. Tonight, I would lie in this guest room and mourn not just my grandmother, but the death of my marriage and a friendship I had treasured. But I would not be a victim. Eleanor hadn't raised a victim. She had raised a fighter. And somewhere in the darkness, I could almost hear her voice. I told you so, Marcus. But now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it? To discover Marcus's strategic revenge and the shocking protections Eleanor built into the inheritance. The secret clause. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Victoria's voice on the phone, casual and cruel. He actually thinks I love him. The words played on repeat like a song I couldn't turn off. At 6 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep, showered, dressed in my best suit, armor for the battle I knew was coming, and left the house before Victoria woke up. Jonathan Pierce's law office was in a historic building in Pioneer Square. All brick and iron and the weight of old Seattle money. I arrived at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, my coffee untouched and growing cold in my hand. The receptionist wasn't even in yet, but Jonathan was waiting for me at the door. His silver hair perfectly combed, his expression grave. "Marcus," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Come in. We have much to discuss." His private office was exactly as I remembered from the will reading. Dark wood, leather chairs, shelves lined with legal volumes that probably cost more than most people's cars. But this time, Jonathan pulled out a second folder from his desk, this one sealed with red wax bearing my grandmother's seal. "Your grandmother came to see me 6 months before she died," Jonathan began, settling into his chair across from me. "She asked me to prepare 2 wills. The first one, which we read at the official reading, covers the basic distribution of her estate. The second one," he tapped the sealed folder. "The second one contains additional protections and conditions that she wanted kept private unless certain circumstances arose." My heart was pounding. What circumstances? Jonathan's eyes, sharp and intelligent behind his wire-rimmed glasses, studied me carefully. Eleanor was very specific. She said, "If Marcus calls you asking about divorce protections within the first year after my death, open the second will." She knew Marcus. Somehow, she knew what might happen. He broke the seal and opened the folder. Inside were several documents, all in Eleanor's precise handwriting, alongside typed legal papers. Jonathan read through them first, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to something like admiration. "Your grandmother," he said slowly, "was a brilliant woman, paranoid perhaps, but brilliant." He looked up at me. "The inheritance isn't actually yours, Marcus. Not in the way the first will suggested." My stomach dropped. "What?" "The 15 million is in an irrevocable trust," Jonathan explained. "You are the beneficiary, yes, but the trust itself has very specific conditions. Cannot be touched in a divorce settlement. Cannot be claimed as community property. Cannot be seized, borrowed against, or used as collateral. You receive a generous monthly distribution, but the principal remains protected." I stared at him, barely breathing. Eleanor did this? She did more than that. Jonathan pulled out another document. She also included what we call a character clause. If you divorce within 5 years of her death, and if that divorce is caused by infidelity on your spouse's part, the trust releases an additional sum, $5 million, to be used solely at your discretion for legal fees, personal recovery, or charitable giving. Your spouse, if proven unfaithful, receives nothing. Not 1 cent. The evidence gathering. I sat in silence for a long moment, processing what Jonathan had just told me. Eleanor had seen this coming. She had known, somehow, that Victoria wasn't who she pretended to be, and she had protected me from beyond the grave. "What do I need to prove infidelity?" I finally asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Jonathan leaned forward. "In Washington state, you need clear evidence. Photos, texts, emails, testimony from witnesses. The more concrete, the better. Do you have reason to believe your wife is having an affair?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made last night. Not of Victoria's phone call, which I'd stupidly not recorded, but of my own voice recounting exactly what I'd heard, time-stamped and detailed. Then I told Jonathan everything. Victoria's sudden coldness after the will reading, her conversations about mansions and money, the phone call with Derek. "Derek Hutchinson?" Jonathan's eyebrows rose. "Your business partner?" "Yes. That complicates things. He has access to your business accounts, your client lists, your proprietary designs." I hadn't even thought of that. The betrayal went deeper than just my marriage. Derek could destroy my firm from the inside. My life's work, everything I'd built independent of Eleanor's money, was vulnerable. "What do?" I asked. Jonathan stood, moving to look out his window at the awakening city below. You do what your grandmother would have done, Marcus. You gather evidence. You protect your assets. And you move strategically, not emotionally. He turned back to me. Eleanor left me one more instruction in her letter. She said if this situation arose, I should give you her private investigator's number. His name is Raymond Cole. He's expensive, discreet, and very, very good at finding the truth. The investigation begins. Raymond Cole looked nothing like what I expected. I'd imagined some grizzled detective from a noir film. Instead, Ray was a neat, compact man in his 50s with kind eyes and the quiet competence of someone who'd seen everything and was no longer surprised by human nature. We met at a coffee shop in Fremont, far from my usual haunts. I told him everything. The will, the phone call, my suspicions about how long this had been going on. Ray listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes in a small leather journal. First thing, he said when I finished, we need to secure your business. If Derek is planning to leave with your wife, he's probably also planning to take clients, maybe even your proprietary designs. We need to document everything in your company files before he has a chance to delete or steal anything. Can we do that legally? I asked. It's your company, Ray said with a slight smile. You have every right to audit your own files. I'd suggest doing it tonight after hours. Make complete backups of everything: emails, client lists, design files, financial records. Store them somewhere Derek can't access. And Victoria? Your wife is trickier. We need evidence of the affair, photographs, recordings, text messages. The phone call you overheard isn't enough because you didn't record it. But if she's being this careless, she'll slip up again. I'll put surveillance on both of them starting today. Within a week, we'll know everywhere they go, everyone they see, and we'll have the proof you need. It felt surreal, sitting in a coffee shop planning to spy on my own wife and business partner. But it also felt necessary. I wasn't the naive man Victoria thought she'd married anymore. That man had died on the stairs of my house, listening to his wife laugh about his grandmother's death. The performance. The hardest part was going home that evening and acting normal. Victoria was in the kitchen when I arrived, cooking dinner, something she rarely did anymore. The smell of garlic and wine filled the air, and soft music played from her phone. She was dressed nicely, hair and makeup perfect. She was trying. Hey, she said brightly when I walked in. I thought we could have a nice dinner together. I know things have been weird since Eleanor died. I want to be here for you, Marcus. Really be here. It was a good performance. If I didn't know the truth, I would have been touched. Instead, I felt hollow. That's nice, I said, setting down my briefcase. Let me just change. Upstairs, I checked my phone. Ray had already sent an update. Both subjects under surveillance. Vehicle GPS trackers installed. Phone records subpoenaed. We'll have preliminary report within 48 hours. I changed into jeans and a sweater, practiced my smile in the mirror. A smile that didn't reach my eyes but would be enough to fool Victoria, and went back downstairs. Dinner was excruciating. Victoria talked about her day, about mundane things, all while I watched her and wondered how many of her words were lies. How long had this been going on? Had she ever loved me, even in the beginning? Or had I always been just a mark, a stepping stone to something better? Marcus. Victoria's voice cut through my thoughts. You're not listening. Sorry, I said. Just tired. What were you saying? She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was warm, familiar. Once that touch had made me feel safe. Now it made my skin crawl. I was saying that I think we should take a trip. Get away for a while. Maybe Hawaii. We could use some of the inheritance money to really treat ourselves. There it was. The inheritance. Always the inheritance. Maybe, I said non-committally. Let's wait until things settle down with the estate. There's a lot of paperwork still. I saw the flash of frustration in her eyes before she masked it. Of course. I just thought it might help you process everything. That night, she tried to initiate intimacy. I pleaded exhaustion, grief, stress. She looked hurt, but I wondered if it was real or just another performance in a marriage that had become a stage play. The business betrayal. The next day, I went to the office early, 5 a.m., before even the cleaning crew arrived. Using my master access, I began the audit Ray had suggested. What I found made my blood run cold. Derek had been siphoning off clients for months. He'd created shadow files, copied our proprietary design software to an external drive, and had been communicating with 3 of our biggest clients about leaving to start his own firm, taking those clients with him. The emails were damning, stretching back almost a year. But it was the dates that really gutted me. The first email to a client about new opportunities was dated 2 weeks after my grandmother had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. They'd been planning this from the moment they knew she was dying, waiting for me to inherit so Victoria could divorce me and take half, while Derek destroyed my business and stole my clients. It wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated destruction of my entire life. I copied everything to an encrypted cloud drive, then to 2 separate external hard drives that I locked in my car. Then I sat in my office, in the gray Seattle dawn, and let myself feel the full weight of it. These were people I had trusted, people I had loved, and they had been systematically plotting to destroy me for money. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "Morning. Coffee before the team meeting." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Sure. Usual place. If he wanted to play friendly, I could play too." Ray had taught me something important. The best way to catch a predator is to let them think they're still hunting. The other woman. I met Derek at our usual coffee shop in Capitol Hill. He was already there, 2 coffees on the table, smiling like nothing was wrong, like he wasn't sleeping with my wife and plotting to steal my business. "Hey man," he said, standing to give me that bro hug we'd done 1,000 times. Took everything I had not to pull away. "How are you holding up?" "Hanging in there," I said, sitting down. "It's been rough." "I bet." Eleanor was a legend. "But hey, at least she set you up pretty well, right?" His smile was meant to be supportive, but I saw the calculation behind it. He wanted to know about the money. "Yeah, it's a lot to process," I said carefully. "The lawyers say there's a lot of complicated trust stuff. It's not as straightforward as I thought." I watched his expression shift, just slightly. "Concern? Worry? What do you mean?" "Just that I can't access it all immediately. There are conditions, distributions, legal stuff. Honestly, I don't fully understand it yet myself." This was a test. If Derek told Victoria, and Victoria suddenly became more affectionate, more patient, I'd know they were waiting for the money to become available. If she became more aggressive about divorce, I'd know they were panicking about the protections. "Well, I'm sure it'll work out," Derek said, but his smile had tightened. "Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. I've been thinking about the firm's direction. Maybe we should expand, bring in some new partners, spread the workload." Translation: he wanted to position himself to take over or split the firm. I nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe. Let's table it until I get through this grief fog. Okay?" We finished our coffee talking about safe things, sports, the weather, office gossip. The whole time, I kept thinking, you're sitting across from me, drinking coffee I bought, planning to steal my life. How do people do this? How do they smile and betray in the same breath? The surveillance report. Ray's preliminary report arrived 2 days later, delivered in person to a secure location. A storage unit I'd rented under a false name. The manila envelope was thick, heavy with evidence. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Victoria and Derek at a restaurant in Bellevue, holding hands across the table. Victoria and Derek entering a hotel in downtown Seattle at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. A Tuesday when Victoria had told me she was at a client meeting. Derek's hand on the small of Victoria's back as they walked into his apartment building. A kiss in a parking garage, passionate and familiar. But it was the text messages that really painted the picture. Ray had used legal channels to subpoena their phone records, and Victoria had been spectacularly careless. Victoria to Derek 2 months ago. Marcus's grandmother only has a few weeks left. We need to be patient just a little longer. Derek to Victoria, 6 weeks ago. I can't wait to be with you openly. This sneaking around is killing me, but the payoff will be worth it. Victoria to Derek, the day after the funeral. He's devastated. Perfect timing. Once the inheritance clears, I'll file. Jonathan says I can claim half of everything acquired during marriage. Derek to Victoria, 3 days ago. Marcus seems suspicious. Did you say something? Victoria to Derek, 3 days ago. He's just grieving. Stop being paranoid. He's too dumb to figure it out anyway. Too dumb to figure it out. I sat in that storage unit, surrounded by evidence of systematic betrayal, and something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but alongside it grew something else. A cold, calculated determination. Eleanor had given me the tools to protect myself. Ray had given me the evidence. Now I just needed to execute the plan perfectly. The trap is set. That evening, I came home with flowers and a bottle of Victoria's favorite wine. She looked surprised when I handed them to her, genuinely caught off guard by the gesture. "What's this for?" she asked, suspicious. "I've been distant," I said, channeling every acting skill I possessed. "Grief makes me shut down, and that's not fair to you. You've been patient with me, and I want you to know I appreciate it." I watched her face transform, suspicion melting into satisfaction. She thought she was winning, thought I was falling back under her spell. "Oh, Marcus," she said, setting down the flowers to hug me. "I know this has been hard. I'm here for you. Always. Always." The word was poison dressed in honey. That night we sat on the couch together, drinking wine, and I let her talk about the future. About travel plans and house upgrades and all the things we could do once the inheritance was sorted out. I nodded and agreed and played the role of the grieving, grateful husband. And the whole time, in my pocket, my phone was recording every word. Later, after Victoria had gone to bed, I met Ray at a 24-hour diner on Aurora Avenue. I handed him the recording. "She's getting bolder," Ray observed, listening to Victoria's casual talk about spending my inheritance. "That's good for us. Confident people make mistakes." "When do we move?" I asked. "Soon. I have one more thread to pull. I've been tracking Derek's finances, and there's something interesting. He's been moving money, a lot of money, into an offshore account. Money that doesn't match his salary or his share of your firm's profits." My hands tightened around my coffee cup. "He's been stealing from the business. That's my guess. Give me 3 more days to confirm it, and then we'll have everything we need. Not just to win the divorce, but to destroy him professionally and possibly send him to prison. 3 more days. 3 more days of living a lie, of sleeping in the same house as a woman who wanted to rob me blind, of working alongside a man who'd stolen from me. 3 more days of being the man they thought I was, too dumb, too trusting, too soft to fight back. But I could do it. For Eleanor's memory, for the truth, for the life I'd built with my own hands, I could play this role a little longer. Because when the trap finally snapped shut, I wanted to make sure it caught both of them completely. The unexpected ally. On day 2 of the final countdown, something unexpected happened. I was leaving the office late. Derek had already gone, probably to meet Victoria, when I noticed someone waiting by my car. A woman, mid-30s, with auburn hair and a nervous expression. "Marcus Blackwood?" she asked as I approached. "Yes. My name is Emma Hartley. I'm Derek's ex-girlfriend. We broke up 6 months ago, and I need to talk to you about him and your wife." I froze. This was either a trap or a gift. "What about them?" Emma looked around the parking garage, then back at me. "Can we go somewhere to talk? Somewhere private." We ended up at a quiet bar in Ballard, tucked into a corner booth where no one would overhear us. Emma ordered a whiskey, drank half of it in one gulp, then started talking. "Derek and I were together for 3 years, she began. "I thought we were going to get married. Then 6 months ago, he suddenly broke up with me. Said he needed space, needed to focus on his career. I was devastated." She took another sip. "But then I saw him, with your wife, at a restaurant where we used to go. They were intimate, clearly together, and I realized he hadn't left me for space. He'd left me for her. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. We were both victims of the same two people. "I started paying attention after that," Emma continued, "following him sometimes. I know it's crazy, but I needed to understand. And what I found." She pulled out her phone, showing me photographs. "They've been together for at least a year, Marcus. Maybe longer, and I've heard them talking. They're planning to take you for everything you have." She had evidence I didn't, earlier photographs, conversations recorded from outside Derek's apartment, receipts from trips they'd taken together while supposedly on separate business trips.